Our film begins with a message declaring that Norway has declared neutrality at the outbreak of World War II. And Narvik, a small town in Norway, is a critical pathway for iron ore that Sweden supplies to Germany for their weapons industry. Because of this, Narvik becomes the center for the Battle of Iron Ore between Germany and Britain. At the harbor, the captain announces that all leave is cancelled for the Marines, except for Corporal Gunnar, who informs his captain that it's his son's birthday. Major Sigurd overhears this and allows Gunnar to go home with the condition that he returns by midnight. Gunnar leaves the port and enters a room where German and British officials are gathered at the Royal Hotel to discuss the safe passage of ships leaving Narvik. In the kitchen, he meets his wife Ingrid, who is working as a server in the gathering. They talk about Gunnar's time at the harbor, and Ingrid returns to work while Gunnar goes outside to greet his sons Ole and his father Alshak. With only 30 minutes until midnight, Gunnar and Ingrid share a very sensual moment after she returns from work. And 4 hours later, Gunnar is seen putting his clothes back on as Ingrid notices an explosion from outside. But they both ignore it and Gunnar goes back to his job. Right outside, Gunnar runs into the colonel, who is rushing to the docks and informs him that the ships have been sunk. A radio message is heard indicating that the Germans are occupying towns in Norway, and the sunken ships were also credited to them. Gunnar heads to the labor to join his fellow Marines. And back at the fort, the colonel approached the leader of the German army and is seen having a conversation with him, which resulted in a standoff between the German troops and the Narvik Marines. As the colonel surrenders, he informs his Marines to do the same, and in a very tense moment, when Major Sigurd shows his hesitancy, the colonel explains that he doesn't want to see a town blown up by the Germans. Despite the colonel's plea, the major, still being hesitant, leads the Marines into an unknown location with the presumed intention of rebelling. In the morning, as Ingrid arrives at her job, she discovers that Germans are ransacking the hotel to find the room key of an Englishman. After using Ingrid to get the master key, Consul Fritz pays for his entire troop to stay at the hotel and orders Ingrid and the hotel manager to evacuate all the guests. As Narvik soldiers and Major Sigurd continue their journey, marching forward out of Narvik, ignoring the German blockade, the soldiers guarding the blockade, unsure if they should shoot or not, ultimately decide to let them pass. At the hotel, Ingrid and her friend Bjorg work together to help the Englishmen evade the German search party, and Ingrid instructs Bjorg to guide them to a hunting cabin in the mountains. And at the Tofty residence, Aslak and his grandson Ole are seen preparing to leave Narvik, preparing their belongings and getting ready to depart. Ingrid quickly joins them, and after finding a way out of the hotel, the three of them head to a port to find a ship that's leaving town. However, their plan is foiled as they discover that the Germans have closed down the town and are preventing anyone from leaving Narvik. At the Marines camp, Corporal Gunnar, due to his expertise and experience with explosives, is called into the operations tent to be asked about the locations of explosive dynamites that could be used against the Germans. After identifying the locations of the explosives, Gunnar and the remaining Marines prepare to halt the delivery of the iron ore into Narvik. They do this because that iron ore is what the Germans use for their weaponry. The Marines resolve to use their skills and resources to stop the German forces from advancing. As the Marines were about to destroy the bridge, they notice a large group of civilians, including Ole and Ingrid, walking on the train tracks. They immediately rush to clear the civilians out of harm's way and prepare themselves for the German arrival. And soon after, the Germans came with heavy artillery and started shooting at the Narvik Marines. And the Narvik Marines were only trying to defend themselves, but they found themselves really overwhelmed by the Germans. And despite their efforts, many of the Marines were injured and others, including Gunnar, were captured. The Germans not only captured the Marines, but also returned the civilians who tried to escape back into the town. Meanwhile, Consul Fritz and the mayor of Narvik had a heated argument, with the mayor demanding an evacuation, while the consul insisted that the Germans were there to protect the town and that the deaths of the people were only due to their hesitance. Furious and feeling that their neutrality has been violated, the mayor stormed out of the room, and Ingrid, worried about her husband Gunnar, approached the consul and asked him to check on Gunnar's whereabouts. The consul agreed to help. The scene then shifted to Ingrid's house, where Bjorg asks her to bring tobacco for the Englishman that escaped. In the cabin, two men convinced Ingrid to spy on the Germans and gather information about their plans for Narvik. They implied that Consul Wusau has taken an interest in her and she could use that to their advantage. The scene then sets stage for a battleship warfare between the Germans and the English army, causing Narvik civilians to take refuge in tunnels out of fear for their lives. Ingrid, Ole, and Alshak head back to the Royal Hotel, hoping that the English have already defeated the Germans, but to their surprise, the hotel is filled with German troops. And despite the danger, Ingrid decides to help the English by providing them with the information on the Germans' war plans. And as she returns home, Ingrid discovers that the Germans' direct bombing has not only destroyed the Royal Hotel and killed many German troops, but it has also dismantled her house and claimed Alshak's life. In the aftermath of the bombing, Ole is injured and bleeding, and Ingrid rushes to his aid. The scene then shifts to Razami, 4 weeks later, where we see the fate of the captured Narvik Marines, including Gunnar, who are being used as transporters for German weaponry deep in the mountains. In the barracks, a Norwegian force attempts to free the captured Marines, and with the help of a gun acquired from a dead German, Gunnar assists in freeing the barracks and defeating the Germans. The scene then moves back to Narvik 1 week later. Ingrid is treating Ole's injuries, as Björg informs her that the Germans are searching door to door for the Englishmen. The Germans threaten to ration food again in an attempt to scare Narvik residents into disclosing the location of the Englishmen. And Ingrid realizes that Ole's wounds have become very severe and he really needs medical attention. And despite the risk, she goes to the Royal Hotel to inform the German council, and she offers to give up the location of the Englishmen in exchange for medical help for Ole. The scene then takes us 2 weeks ahead in Rombaken, where the French and the Norwegian army are set to raid a final hill before Narvik, on which the Germans have settled. Gunnar and the 2 other soldiers take a different approach and destroy the cannon that the Germans have been hiding in a tunnel, which marks the beginning of the battle for Narvik. At the Royal Hotel, the Germans prepare to leave, and Consul Wusu asks to see Ingrid before he departs for Germany. He offers to take her with him, but also informs her that Corporal Gunnar has been erased from the German list, meaning that he's no longer alive. Ingrid and Polly, the owner of the Royal Hotel, have a conversation upstairs in which Polly tells Ingrid to leave town and give her the money she owed for her working at the Royal Hotel, and Ingrid sets off with Ole. On May 28, 1940, Gunnar and his fellow soldiers arrive in Narvik and receive a warm welcome from the town's citizens. Gunnar heads home to reunite with his wife and son, and immediately after their emotional reunion, Gunnar questions Ingrid about the rumor that he heard that she was in business with the Germans. After she admits to what she did, she explains the situation, and Gunnar still calls her a traitor, and they have a very heated argument. But an air attack begins soon after, and the town of Narvik descends into chaos. And Gunnar rushes back out to see that a fellow soldier has died. The scene cuts to Ingrid as she takes Ole and walks away from the town of Narvik. And Gunnar is faced with a dilemma. Should he leave with his family or stay and fight for his country against the Germans? As Ingrid and Ole try to board a ship out of Narvik, the townspeople start pushing her around, calling her a traitor. Then, an emotional scene unfolds as Gunnar, torn between his loyalty to his country and his love for his family, decides to leave with them. The family boards the ship, eager to start a new life far from the dangers of war, and the movie ends by reflecting on the aftermath of the Battle of Narvik, depicting it as Hitler's first defeat, though it was only a temporary setback. The Battle of Narvik, the largest military engagement ever fought on Norwegian soil, reaches its conclusion on June 8, 1940, as Narvik soldiers lay down their weapons. And that is how the movie ends, boys and girls. I hope you enjoyed our recap. Please leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe to our channel. I will see you guys on the next recap. Bye!